So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today as we talk about how leadership is evolving with the next wave of leaders. My name's Colleen Jones. I'm a senior coach here at the Roundtable, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. Before we dive in, I'd just like to start with something that's really important to us here at the Roundtable. So, as part of our ongoing commitment to reconciliation, we partnered with an organization called Inspire. They're an Indigenous charity that invests in the education of Indigenous youth. And in order to honor the legacy of the 215 children whose unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, BC, we've set a goal to fund 215 university scholarships over the next 5 years. So if you'd like to join our efforts, please reach out at the email that you see on our screen. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Oakville, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. It's also part of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat peoples. And I encourage you to consider the lands that you're on today and what you might want to acknowledge. Before we get started, just a quick note on how you can participate today. So we do have everyone muted as it is a webinar, but the chat is open. And at the Roundtable, we are really all about collective impact. So don't be shy. We'd love for you to share your thoughts, questions, ideas, anything that's coming up for you, either in the chat or in Q&A. We'll be monitoring both throughout the session. We'll be keeping an eye as you're going through, so don't be shy. For those of you who are new to us, the Roundtable helps organizations unleash collective impact by optimizing the passion of high potential leaders, unleashing the exponential power of teams, and building high performance cultures where people want to stay. And we do this through group, team, and one-on-one coaching, building mindsets and behaviors that matter most. So if you joined us back in November, at that time, Maria and Glain shared the research that we did last year on high potential talent. And that conversation got us a little curious about the next generation of leaders. And so today we're going to be continuing the conversation and talking about Gen Z. So really thinking about how do you prepare for that next generation of leaders that's coming up. So leading our discussion today is our founder and president, Glain Roberts-McCabe. That's Glain like shine. Glein's a certified executive coach with over 30 years of experience leading teams and has a specialized focus on accelerating the development of high potential leaders. And joining Glain is Maria from Management Research Group. Management Research Group brings decades of expertise in understanding what makes leaders effective. And as head of research and education, Maria ensures MRG's research remains leading edge and trains practitioners in the MRG suite of assessments around the world. So with that, Glain, I will hand things over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Colleen, and welcome everyone. Okay, so full disclosure here, Maria and I don't have a lot of concrete answers for all of you about Gen Z. We are really looking to kind of curate a dialogue today about what might be happening, right? This is a group that's just entering into the workforce now. So as Maria and I, we've probably had, I don't know, like 200 conversations about this webinar, Maria? Like it feels
Absolutely. Like and they're long conversations too.
I would really not like to see the transcripts of those conversations because it's really interesting. And I think what we wanted to do today in the kind of the flow of the conversation is like, let's all get grounded in those generational stereotypes that we all think about. And then let's talk specifically about the underpinning, and those of you who are on the call with us when we launched our report last fall, one of the things that I just personally am obsessed about lately is the kind of the why underneath the behaviors. And that's why, I've loved partnering with MRG for, oh my gosh, I don't know how many years. Since 1999, I've partnered with MRG. And it's because they have this really amazing ability to go under the covers. Like it's easy to do assessments to tell you what people are doing. But I think what's really a differentiating conversation is why? Why do people do that? And so what we're going to look at is some kind of motivational trends that, we've seen that differentiate high potentials in the past. And what are we seeing in Gen Z and what might we want to kind of watch out for and start thinking about? And then what are the behaviors that we've seen evolve in leadership over the last 25 years? So a really interesting discussion. My hope for all of you that are in the room, and certainly those of you that are leading talent in your organizations, that it gives you some food for thought. maybe a chance to sort of reflect on directionally where you are going as you start thinking about talent planning. And also, maybe some ways to think about how do we motivate and engage these folks a little bit differently than in the past. Because I have a feeling they're going to be a lot different. Um, Maria's Maria's going to keep me honest with the actual data around that, but I'm basing my data on all the leaders that we work with and the trends that we're seeing. So as Colleen said, we love kind of the interactivity. I mean, the foundation of the roundtable is that it's peers teaching peers. Like, we are an organization that, one of our little taglines is leadership isn't learned in a binder, you learn by doing. And so I know there's a lot of amazing practitioners on this call. So what I would love you to do is, put in your questions, put in the challenges, put in the concerns that you have for Gen Z, put in what's working for you. And as we're going through and sharing the data and what the data is saying, what are you seeing? What supports the data in the world that you come from, and what might be a little bit different? Anything else, Maria, that you would add to that in terms of requests from the group?
I really think, when we look at data, we're looking at, I mean, it's numbers, right? That's great. It tells you a lot, but you would need to look at what it means practically. And that's what I'm hoping that you guys can, that everyone here can help us find, right? What does it mean? What does this look like in the real world? What are you
Yeah.
seeing? And what doesn't make sense, right? What maybe do we need to explore a little further because it just doesn't match up with what you're experiencing out there with people from Gen Z?
Yeah, I love that. I already see that there's something in the Q&A, so I'm just going to go and see if it's something that I need to talk about. How do we bridge generation with established organizational policies that are perceived archaic?
Oh my goodness.
Steph, the bomb question. Okay, well, let's see. We're going to work through it.
We're going to get to that one.
We really will. So, and I think, this is a great opportunity to maybe what do you call that? Crowdsource some ideas on this, really, because as I said, I think, this is a group that's just coming into the workplace. So there's a lot of opportunity here to think about what do we do? What do we do with that? What do we need to do differently with the group? Colleen, are you popping in to tell me something else?
I'm just saying, Nina also is asking, it would be important to learn how to keep Gen Z motivated and engaged.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
What did I say about leadership is not in a binder? Diana, it's a statement that we have that leadership is not learned in a binder. You learn it by doing. I always think that you can read a million things about how to fire somebody, but until you go and fire somebody, it's a whole other experience. So and I think often where you get the most learning is actually from talking to other people who've actually had to go through that. They can give you the most practical tips, right, about what to do. So
and that's analogous to what I said about the research, right? You can read a lot about research, but until you experience what it's telling you in the real world, it doesn't take real meaning, right?
And I think a lot of research is like bell curves, and it's the people who completed the survey or the complete, so yes. I think we have to look at all of that, right? So that's what I love about MRG, though. You have this massive global database, so we're not kind of getting this little tiny segment. We're getting a much broader view that really gives us, I think, some really meaningful trends. All right, let's get into the generations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but what I do love is a good stereotype. So let's talk about, some of the stereotypes that, for the boomer generation, which are now kind of really at the tail end in workplaces. I mean, I think what was interesting, Maria, when we were looking at the data is the sample size you're able to draw from on boomers. It's gotten so much smaller.
Yeah, like a sixth of the size of the other three generations that we were looking at. There's been a big shift in the last few years. And those numbers are really dropping.
Yeah, so I love the work of Linda Duxbury, who is a professor at Carleton University and has done a lot of research over the years around generations. And one of the things that really struck me about her work is she talks about how generations it's not about the year you were born, but it's about the things you experienced. And it's almost like a set of generational values that starts to come into play. So with baby boomers, what were some of the things? Well, I mean, there was this whole thing that you join the company, you can climb the ladder, and this belief that, long tenure would be rewarded. Their work ethic was shaped by paying your dues, right? Like putting in your time, making sure that if you did that, then you're going to, move ahead. there was a lot of identity tied to the job, right? A lot of status, a lot of social status tied to, titles and climbing that ladder. And then the other thing about that group was there was more hierarchy, right? Like the manager knows best. It felt normal. It felt stable. That was sort of the boomer piece. Now, the closer you were to 64, the more you're going to feel more like a Gen Xer, though, because boomers, it was sort of like if you were in 46, you're getting on the bus early, you got a seat with a window. By the time it comes to 64, it's more crowded. And that's when we start to see a lot of changes in the workplace. So Gen X, yay, Gen X. Tiny generation, bitter generation. I'm an Xer. I love being an Xer. But what were we shaped by? Well, for us, it was the layoffs. It was the pink slips in the 1980s, seeing parents laid off. It was the downsizing. And it really broke the trust of that parental, the paternal thing of organizations were going to look after you for life. That got blown out. That sort of then for Gen Xers, it became, okay, I'm going to have to look after myself. So I'm going to make job choices that are really going to help me build my resume, sort of more of this lone wolf. Like I'm not relying on the company to look after me. And sort of that values was more about autonomy, right? Like a higher degree of autonomy than boomers who are a little bit more team oriented. Work life became more of a thing because now we've got two parents working. So this dual income piece started to get people thinking more about those structures. And then leadership expectations from Gen X, they are expecting leaders to be, direct. Competence is highly valued. So that more of that direct form of communication, real kind of clear pay for performance started coming in with Gen X. So I want to be able to be rewarded for my contributions in a different way. And we get to the millennials. And I remember being Gen X and being told like I was so disloyal. And that just seems to be ramping, right? Because Xers, we were trying to build a resume. We want to have our thing. Then millennials come in, it's even almost more so amplified, right? So when did they come of age? I mean, the big thing was obviously technology, right? This is the group that were the first ones to probably have access to computers early on. And that globalization, it came then with this view more towards these collaborative tools, right? This idea of, I don't have to wait to be given the information. I can go and find the information. The other thing that happened to them was, and I think this is an X issue, with X because there were no jobs when a lot of people graduated, everybody went back to school, they got degrees, masters, things like that. Well, for the millennials, then credentialing starts to become a real thing. And we see this now as a problem actually in a lot of industries where we've really driven this one path to success is to go to university. And so we see the trades, lots of industries are really suffering to find talent because we've almost taken this credentialing to a really high degree. Meaning and development starts to become really important with this millennial group. So we see coaching really taking a rise. I think most of you in organizations probably have some manager as a coach program. Everybody started to look at coaching and these growth pathways, wanting a career pathway. And then the leadership expectations were really around this like inclusive leadership, more opportunities for growth kind of driving engagement with the millennial group. So Gen Z, they're coming in. Let's look at what's been shaping them. I mean, this is a group that has been like growing up with what I would call like stack disruption. Like we have everything going on here. There is, am I ever going to afford a house? Am I going to have a job? Is AI going to take a job? That we've got climate change. We've got this global like really deterioration of the what I would almost describe as the norms around how countries treat each other. Like there is a dissolution of everything happening in that group. A pandemic. Let's throw a pandemic in there, right? So this is what they've been kind of really shaped by a ton of uncertainty, like a ton of uncertainty. And then on top of that, this is truly the first digitally native generation that is different in a way than millennials. We used to call millennials the digital natives, but this always on connectivity of this generation, the sensitivity to mental health, the psychological safety, the information overload. I think a lot of that has to do with like our brains can't handle all of this information coming at us. We haven't been designed for this. So this is the group that's really getting that full on and has been getting it full on probably since they were in kindergarten. they're very pragmatic about security and fairness. They grew up in the social justice movement. They are much more clear on boundaries, what's good for them, what's not. They're not going to kind of suck it up or turn a blind eye, right, on transgressions around that. And what they're looking for in leadership is empathy, support, connectivity, that sort of safe space to get feedback, get coaching, support me, but in a much different way than probably some of the other previous generations, or in a much different weighting, I would say. So I'd love to see what you're seeing around the generations, if you kind of that kind of aligns with your own experience, maybe if you're a millennial or if you're an Xer, what you relate to, and that's the framing. So now we're going to kind of dial in and talk Gen Z at work. So maybe Marie, I'll throw this over to you to talk through what
Okay,
we.
okay. I wanted to just say something about that recap you just gave us on generations
Yeah,
and that background. I really like that it's what's really valuable about it. It's not about what the different generations are doing. Like we're not putting the blame on them or the onus on them. It's this is what's happening around them. This is
yeah,
perhaps why we're seeing, I mean, this is not perhaps, this is why we're seeing differences, right? It's not coming from the individuals in this generation. It's an interaction with their environment, right? That's creating these situations.
yeah. That's what
Um,
I really love about Linda Duxbury's work. Like she really looks at, what are the things that really shaped your worldview when you were growing
mhm.
up, right? What did you experience, and then how did that? Like what that's the why. It's what I was talking about earlier. Like that
Mhm.
starts to get into some of the why people sort of show up in the workplace the way that they do, right? Um,
Absolutely. So
okay,
let's talk
Gen Z.
about Gen Z at work, right? They're here and their numbers are growing, and that's just the reality. That's life. So currently they're 18% of the workforce, which is really surprising. I mean, that just kind of happened overnight.
Mm,
As I do research on generations regularly. And I remember just a few years ago still focusing on millennials, right? Oh, let's see how we
mm,
can help them thrive. But now that shift to Gen Z is reflective of what we're seeing in the workplace. And, 2030 is just a few years away, and they're going to be almost a third of the workforce at that point. So nearly at the proportion of Gen X and Gen Y, which means baby boomers those numbers are going to continue to decrease. And we're really going to have these three major generations in the workplace. We kind of already do. I mean, there are
yeah,
still a lot of boomers, right? But
yeah.
the larger part of that is X, Y,
Yeah, I
and
feel like a
Z.
lot of boomers are at a different kind of stage. I find that what's been really interesting post-pandemic is the number of boomers that are really doing career act twos. They're really sort of looking
Mhm.
to exit out of what was traditionally, roles that people would stay in for much longer, looking for more of that flexibility. But when you showed me this number, I was shocked at by 2030,
Yeah.
30% are and like Gen X is like we're the tiny population. We're often forgotten about, right? So we're pretty insignificant to begin with. But this is really, I think, for everybody on the call, like we got to think about this. This is really a big wave coming
Mhm.
in, right,
And
to our organizations.
the size of Gen X is probably is playing a big part in this, right? Because boomers, because it was such a large
Yeah.
generation, I mean, it took a while to see those shifts in their numbers. But now with Gen X, we're probably going to see a lot. I mean, it's going to be a quicker shift. And eventually, once Gen X reaches the age of retirement, Y and Z are going to take over a lot quicker than X and Y took over what baby boomers,
Yeah.
the space that baby boomers were occupying. So yeah, so the numbers are increasing. They're here, and this is why we're here, right? How do we help them thrive? So this was really interesting. So this is not our research, but and this is not the only one, but it turns out that most Gen Zers would rather be individual contributors than middle managers
Mm,
right now, right in their 20s. And I mean, what's coming to mind when you guys, when you all see this, right? What does this mean in terms of the future of leadership? If you
mhm.
have this generation coming in that at this moment in time is more comfortable being individual contributors, and why? Why are we seeing this? Colleen, is
Well,
there a
I was
question?
just gonna connect it to this. Sephora has a question in the Q&A around how do you get this generation to tap in with more discretional effort, right? Like historically, careers advanced through putting in extra hours, maybe doing some extra work, and not seeing as much interest from this generation. Any thoughts on that, Maria?
That is a great question. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit about how you motivate them. I don't know how much I want to preview. It might look a little different from what we've
Yeah,
seen before. And let's
yeah.
just leave it
All
at
right, we'll
that.
wait.
I
We'll
think
wait for that one. Sorry, I jumped the
Steph,
gun.
Steph, were you on one of our 200 calls? Because honestly, like this was the big topic. So yeah, we'll get there. But like I do think this thing to think about is, okay, if people aren't that motivated to go into management, what are we going to do about that? Right. And I will say
Exactly.
that I'm seeing that more and more, um, or I'm seeing more and more people go into it and then opt out of it. Like
Hmm.
tail end millennials, I see a lot of those people kind of go in and then go, you know what? This is
Not for
like,
me.
right? And now I look at them and I think, oh my gosh, you'd be amazing. You're an amazing leader. What are you talking about? Right. So this is really, I think this is an interesting one, but yeah, we'll dive into. Okay. The other thing you
So,
found about
so then
millennials, or
when
Gen Z,
we
I should say.
yeah, so oh, I thought oh, okay.
Oh,
Uh I thought the controlling thing was there. No, so one more thing about Gen Z. So uh a recent MetLife study found there are a few things we need to be aware of if we're going to support Gen Z, is where I should be starting. So,
mm,
for example, what we're seeing is they're feeling more loneliness, they're feeling more depression, they're feeling more stress and burnout. Uh, and when I see this, as a psychologist, what scares me is they're so young, right? These are things we might see later on in life, right? What's happening there? And there's this really interesting research on the flourishing index, and this is a measure of how positive someone feels about their life, right? How optimistic they are about the future. How much balance they're perceiving, how much they're connecting with other people. Like, what are the good things? How satisfied am I with my life? And traditionally, it followed a U-shaped curve, right? So at the beginning, there where you see the circle, so early in life, people are flourishing, right? I'm a young adult. Life is great. So much to look forward to. Then midlife comes in, marriage, kids, parents, a lot of things start to happen. And traditionally, well, that flourishing those scores tend to dip. But then once people start moving to older midlife and then later life, it starts to move up again, right? So it ends up being higher. So this has been the pattern for generations, right? What we're finding now is that if you perform the same analysis now, and you look at age and flourishing index, Gen Z, which is the youngest part of this current cohort, are low, right? So instead of starting like typical generations before them used to higher, like you see on the left, they're starting low. What does that mean, right? So there are two questions there, right? One is why. Why are they so low? But also, what does this mean for their future? Does this mean they're going to dip even further in midlife? Are they going to stay at the same level? Hopefully, at some point, it starts to go up. But it is a big sign that something is up. And
mhm.
it is something we need to be mindful of and thinking about if we want to support Gen Z holistically, right? I mean, at work and, I mean, we know that life comes into work. So how do we support them? Because we are seeing some signs that are not so great and not necessarily their fault.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other piece that we wanted to talk about a little bit, we like, what do they want from work? And I remember you said to me, like, these aren't really unreasonable expectations, right? When you look at the list here.
Not at all, right? So they want a competitive salary. I mean, who wouldn't, right? We wanted them when we were younger. And of course, what competitive means is going to is in the eye of the beholder. But they want things like work non-work balance. They want purpose and meaning in their work, right? Not just going to work for the sake of going to work. They want physical and psychological well-being. And part of that might be because they're feeling that they need it, right? So they want organizations to support that. They want opportunities for growth, but also they have this flexible way of thinking about it where they are more comfortable with lateral moves than other generations before them may have been. And they do want performance feedback. And we hear that a lot. Why they always want to know how they're doing. They want feedback, feedback, feedback. And yes, that shows up. But yeah, these are not unreasonable, right? The competitive salary is just one part of it, but they also want these other things that are not that are actually positive and beneficial to have in the workplace.
It's interesting, and I was at a course last week, and the topic of, it's always so funny when you hear people talk about like the younger generation. I'm like, oh my God, like we're all sounding like our parents, right? Um, but there was this, and it's often said in a very kind of joking way that these people can't take feedback. They burst into tears all the time. But what's really connecting the dots for me in this conversation is when you think about the fragility, right? Like this is such an uncertain world, and also there's like a lot more kind of sort of, I think, spotlight on mental health, and people are more open to talking about it. But also, I always feel pendulum swing. This is probably my Gen X in me, the suck it up Gen X side of me is saying, yeah, okay, but don't label yourself with these stuff to keep yourself in a box. Like I think
Mhm.
there's that piece, but when I think about feedback, I find like a lot of the Gen X or Boomer leaders that I work with struggle with how to give the feedback in a way that's constructive, right? I
Mhm.
think my sense of Gen Z is they perform so much better with positive reinforcement.
Mhm.
And yet, I think as Gen X, where I was more used to really like, here's all the stuff you did wrong, fix it. Here's all the stuff you did wrong, fix it. Like even our
Mhm.
performance review system, like we know it's archaic, but what do? You don't focus on your strengths. You're told all the gaps you have, right? That is
Mhm.
what we do in organizations. And I think psychologically for this group, that approach to feedback, even like we say, they want lots of feedback, but I would say like a lot of the leaders I work with are kind of confounded about how to do it. And I think it's because often we oh, I'm like connecting dots to some other motivation things, Maria, that I hope I remember. But I think we over index, right, towards
Mhm.
constructive, because that's what, I don't know, that's what we were used to potentially. And as parents, like I had veteran parents, we didn't even talk about veterans, but those folks were hardcore, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
There was no warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, and I think in general we're moving in that direction. And but Gen Z is the first generation to start asking for this at a really earlier stage of their
Yeah,
careers.
yeah.
So
So
there's something there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good segue into the motivation. So let's get under the why around, how we show up. And so what we thought we'd do is start with just the high potential, because we do want to sort of focus on sort of a particular group to kind of keep it
Mhm.
focused a little bit, because we can go all over the place. Um, let's talk through what motivates this group, what you found motivate this group. So I will
And these are
bring
high
this up.
potentials in general, regardless of generation, what motivates them. And just to be clear, motivation here is not whether or not they're motivated, but it's what motivates them, what drives, what energizes them. And for lower motivators, what maybe repels them or just drains, their emotional energy. And so when we look at high potentials in general, what we find is that they are motivated by giving, by contributing. They enjoy supporting others and adding value to the collective success of their groups. They are motivated by excelling, by mastery. In a way, they want to perform at the highest standards, right? They want to achieve excellence. They're motivated by challenge and innovation. So they have a lot of energy to explore new ideas, to try new things, to test limits, to take risks. So challenge and innovation are something that attracts them. They are motivated by recognition and status. And that is they enjoy external validation and they enjoy experiencing prestige from others. And finally, they enjoy being in the spotlight, being able to show their charisma, being able to entertain other people, make them laugh. That recognition that that
Yeah.
they can liven up a situation.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what motivates those high potentials. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, no, I think, and I think of the, because we work with so many hypos, I can picture so many people, and some of them are on the call today, right? That is just so part of like who they are and what they bring to their leadership as well. So what doesn't drive them, Maria?
Okay, what does not drive them is stability and security. So they are less driven by the predictable, the comfort of knowing what's next, and just ensuring security, which kind of strengthens this idea that challenge and innovation, trying new things. So those two things kind of strengthen each other. And,
Mhm.
they're comfortable with new things. They might get bored quickly if things get a little too repetitive and monotonous. I am curious. These are averages, right? So if you have examples of, where you may or may not see these, that would be interesting to see as
Yeah,
well.
and I do think there's things in different sectors and different industries that sort of tweak some of these motivations a little bit
Hmm.
differently. So this is sort of a generalization of where we are now and what the recent research has shown around when you differentiate high potentials. And we also have to remember this is probably a big millennial Gen X population that we're looking at
Hmm.
because Z isn't in that group yet, right? So what we wanted to do was to look to say, okay, so we've
Yes.
painted the picture of what does motivate your hypos generally today.
Hmm.
But what Maria
But
did
that's
was,
but that's a good point, Glenn, because
yeah,
this sample of high potentials does not have very many Gen Zers,
that's
right?
right.
So this definition of high potential is really based on the older generations that are currently in the workplace. Gen Zers are still in the process of being identified as high potentials and going through assessments like the one that we used for this research.
Yeah. And I think this is sort of now we move into the crystal ball portion of the program. Like if we were to start to place some bets or predict some things. So one of the things that this kind of came off of our call last
Mhm.
year when we were launching the roundtable report. I was saying to Maria, I'm so curious if things are switching because I'm seeing such a
Mhm.
difference, when I talk to my daughter about work and, what's important to her and things like that. And seeing the quote unquote struggles of some of our
Mhm.
clients to kind of figure out how do we engage these folks. So that was what really triggered the conversation with
Mhm.
us to go, well, why don't we dig into that and see what's there? And so one of the things that Maria did was she started to look at, well, let's compare apples to apples, right? So we got to
Mhm.
compare apples to apples. We can't kind of go, let's compare Gen Z's motivation now to like when they're in their 20s to people who are in their 30s and 40s. So um, let's talk a bit about what motivated millennials and X in their 20s. So this is
Mhm.
winding us all back in time and what were the big kind of drivers for those of us on the call that are in these groups.
Yeah, it's like we have a magical time machine and we can go back to the 90s and see Gen
Yeah,
Xers in their 20s and
yeah.
2000s. Yes. Am I
So
doing? Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
yeah. No, okay. Do you want to no? You take it.
Are you
No,
sure?
take it.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
so what motivated millennials and Gen X in their 20s, right? So at the same age where Gen Z is now, gaining stature, that is receiving that external recognition, being able to have prestige, right? Just, being recognized as someone of influence.
Well, and I think that makes total sense because when you're in your 20s, or at least certainly when I, as a Gen Xer in my 20s, I mean, it was kind of around amassing experience that was going to allow me to progress in my career. And I can remember when titling was incredibly important to me. Like, I wanted that manager title, I wanted that director title. I think those sorts of validation things were particularly strong for me in my 20s. So if you are relating to that, like throw it in the chat, let us know that that I'm not alone in needing that kind of external validation, please. But that was
Well, and you're
definitely a
you're new
piece.
to the workplace.
Yeah, you're
How do
proving
you know
yourself,
you're doing
right?
the right thing? A lot of it comes from that external validation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Okay. Next one.
Entertaining, which I mentioned earlier, which has to do with being able to use your charisma, enjoying being in the spotlight, being able to entertain and make people, make sure everyone's enjoying themselves and that they're focusing on you, right? There, you can take over the room. So people in their 20s, I think it kind of, it's in a way it strengthens that gaining stature, right? I want
Mm,
recognition. I also want the spotlight. I mean, these are two different things, but there's a theme
mm.
there.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like you're really trying to, and 20s is such a horrible decade. Like it's a great decade in many things, but it's also a horrible decade because you're really trying to figure out, oh, where am I going? What am I doing? What am I going to be when I grow up?
Hmm.
Most of us, I find, don't go to work for what we went to school for. So it's often a time of confusion. Like you just want to get a job, right? And then
Yes,
you sort of go,
yes.
oh my God, now what, right? Um,
Confusion and discovery
just
and
yeah,
figuring stuff out.
yeah,
Yes.
it's an interesting time of life. Okay, and then the last one that you found was the
So they are people in their 20s tend to be motivated, or Gen X and millennials, by structuring, by having process, by creating process. And this could also be seen as I want to know how I get to where I want to go, right? Don't just
mhm,
tell me, do what you can so you can be promoted. No, what's a path toward promotion? Like how do I
mhm,
get to where I need to be? How do I do what's expected of me? So clarity in a way about what's
mhm.
expected of them. Which, as you were saying just now, Glenn, right? It's a period of a lot of change and adapting and learning new things. So the more you can reduce that uncertainty for people in their 20s, it seems to be helpful, right? And motivating to them.
Yeah, and I think Colin, your question about how to balance the energy and resources put into onboarding, knowing that the tenure
Mm,
of a Gen X employee is typically shorter. I mean, in some ways, right, this structure, if you think about what we needed in our 20s, right, that, okay, what is the pathway? How can I do a good
mhm.
job? Tell me what's expected. All of those things which again, I'm having these ideas about why Gen X are probably very bad leaders for certain Gen Zs. I'm looking in the
You're
mirror
like a
here,
mea
people.
culpa.
I am looking in the mirror here right now, folks. Okay, so let's give a bit of a drum roll. So, what about Gen Z? I would love, like, if you're
Yeah,
brave enough
some
in the chat,
predictions. What are people
yeah, what are the
expecting to see
predictions? Do you think
here?
are going to be similar or different to
All
what
right, so Gen Z's in
we
their
all wanted?
20s. What motivates them?
Do you think it's the same or is it completely different? What would you guess?
I think I was surprised. I'm not going to speak for you. I was surprised by the findings. I'm not,
I was too.
yeah, yeah.
I was too, because I was like placing bets that it was going to be completely different, right?
Awesome.
Um, motivation, purpose. Yeah.
Ooh. Oh my
Steph,
goodness.
like Steph
We've had
has it.
some
Okay, I'm
spies
actually
on
going
our
to do
calls,
this next
Glenn.
one with you, Maria. I'm just going to get Steph to do it for you or for us.
I
Okay,
know.
so let's see. Were they that different? Uh, no.
So you're seeing gaining stature, entertaining and structure, motivate Gen Z in their 20s, just like they did millennials, and just like these motivators were important for Gen Xers.
Yeah.
So,
And we did find one little difference though, and I
but
think it's a
yes.
biggie.
Okay, so what we
Let's
did
talk about
find, I'll
this.
introduce it and then I know, Glenn, I know you're like waiting to jump in and start
Yeah.
talking about your impression of it. What we did find is that excelling is lower for Gen Z in their 20s than it was for Gen X and for millennials. And what is excelling? Excelling is the motivator to achieve a lot, right? To accomplish a lot. And it's kind of accomplishing for the sake of accomplishment. Like I just want to do more. I just want to achieve at high levels. Right. I mean this is one of my drivers. This is one of the things that determines how much time, how much effort I'm going to be placing on the things that I'm going to be doing. So I don't even know. I mean, I've got so many thoughts. So one big question is, okay, so excelling itself is not motivating to them. How do we help them become motivated? That was one of the questions we got. Why do we think it's lower? Yeah, what I don't know, reactions to this, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think to sort of tie it into a couple of, the questions, right? When we think about, like, I think your question, Seth, about like, hey, we were all used to grinding it out, right? Like putting in the extra hours, going the extra mile, going the distance. Like in some ways, that's an excelling energy. Like I'm proven to myself that I can do this, right? I mean, there's other, motivational drivers that can kind of go into that too. But I think the thing that when Maria, you and I were talking about this last week was we've got a lot of very traditional ways of motivating people to get results, right? That are kind of numbers based.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of more that traditional sense of, you're going to hit the target. You're going to, and
Mm-hmm.
let's get a bigger target next year and a bigger target next year and da 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 da. And
Yes.
I think your comment to me was, well, it's going to be interesting if that's not what really gets these folks up at night. Is that the right way to
Mm-hmm.
motivate them?
Mm-hmm. No, that's right. I see it as, the progress bar, right? The progress bar was enough to motivate you, and then you just kept moving the goal on that progress bar, and people were
Mm-hmm.
motivated to try to reach it. Um, but how do you motivate a generation that's not motivated by that progress bar?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what that means is this is not the only motivator, right?
Right.
So at the individual level, we need to find out what it is that this person truly wants. And we just looked at some other research, right? They want work-life balance. They want uh, psychological and physical well-being. They want, in a way, there's more purpose. They're more
Mm-hmm.
purpose driven
They're more
when it
purpose
comes to
driven.
trying to achieve,
Yeah,
to
I
get
think
them to
that's
what
I
they
think that's
want.
going to be the big driver. And then the other one that is in the research, and you and I were having a bit of a debate about this, not debate like debate, but like debate about, oh, I wonder what this is. This is the one that, for me was the one to watch
Mhm.
motivator. So you have in the instrument that you use to kind of measure it, you have a motivator that's called controlling. Nobody
Mhm.
likes that word. But it really is about like, I get energy from directing other people. Like I actually enjoy, you know, uh, getting groups moving forward. It's a
Mhm.
sort of like what we would stereotypically call in some ways, it's the energy that drives leadership behaviors, right?
Mhm.
It's a big driver for leadership. Um, but with this seven, well, I was saying to you, I said, I think it's interesting that the controlling energy is lower. And you said to me, well, Glein, in your 20s, right?
Yes. So there, so in our research on motivation, we've looked at which motivators tend to increase with age, which ones tend to decrease with age, and also just from debriefing the assessment with younger people, there's this pattern where controlling energy or the motivation to be in charge, to be a leader, to drive the efforts is lower when people are in their 20s. And then it jumps up around people's 30s. And so one hypothesis around that is how do you know that something motivates you if you haven't had the opportunity to experience it,
That's
right?
right.
I don't know if something's going to be enjoyable, fun, something that really drives me if I've never done it. And a lot of people in their 20s just haven't had that opportunity. And so they just, when they're filling out the questionnaire, they don't identify that as something that they're, that's emotionally satisfying to them. Normally, what would happen is people will start to experience it as as they volunteer to be in charge of things and start moving up the organizational hierarchy. But what happens when you have a generation that is more comfortable being an individual contributor than moving into middle management, right? Are they going to have that opportunity to experience that? And again, are we going to see what we've traditionally seen, where this energy for being in control, for being in charge, increases with age? Um, I will say, you can be in charge without having, official, managerial title or authority. But, if there's something different about this generation, if this does in fact play out, where they don't, participate in those opportunities as often.
I think it really speaks to sort of the generation that's been really brought up in a much more cooperative. I just think of the change in with being digital natives to the degree that they are. I remember when my daughter was researching university classes, I mean, she just went on like these sites where she could find out what teachers were good. It was all peer connect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a much more sort of peer-based approach. Like I think, I always think about controlling energy as like you've got the push approach to leadership, or you've got kind of more of the, hey, you know what, we're a team, collective, da 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 da. Now that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really line up with how we traditionally look at leadership in organizations,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. So I think this is one to watch, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out over time.
Yeah. And
And yeah,
no,
sorry, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say that, Gen Z is in their 20s. We're looking at them. We're going to keep our eyes on them. So once they start getting a little bit older, I mean, these questions will be answered, but it's good to start thinking about where it might be going, because we do have to worry about or care about what we do to motivate them so that we give them
Yeah.
the best
Yeah, the other
decisions.
thing too that I was thinking about a little bit for those of us who are Gen X leaders, and maybe early stage millennial leaders, is I think about, going back to the Duxbury work of, kind of the Gen X, like the sort of self-sufficient, I'll figure it
Mhm.
out, this, like, because you're not going to look after me. So if I don't know, I'm going to figure it out. I think that creates like more of a maybe less of an inclination to provide the guardrails, to provide the support. Like circling back on this idea that this group needs feedback. They like the
Mhm.
structure.
Mhm.
When you have a bias maybe towards, like, I know my personal bias as a leader is, okay, tell me the end game and then get out of my way and I'm going to go figure it out. But if you've got a group of people that are like, okay, wait a second. I mean, 20, but I was like that in my 20s to some degree too. So this could be a me thing. But I think to myself, I wonder if, we have some biases around thinking that we're giving a lot of support to people and not necessarily giving them enough support, which then doesn't feel
Mhm.
safe, right? And makes people feel more uncomfortable. And then this way we lead in with a group that is more used to that sort of collective, collaborative,
Mhm.
um, sort of less hierarchical approach to getting information, sharing information, um, yeah, I think it's interesting. I just think there's some interesting things happening.
And
Um,
there's oh, no, no.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, this is how our conversations normally go. We're like interrupting each other the whole time. No, I was going to say there's something there because so much is shifting about being present and paying attention to how things are being received. So, am I
yeah,
providing enough support? How that we really need to be mindful of when because it is definitely shifting, and sometimes stereotypes create a situation where we're less likely to do that because we're like, "Bah, that's that's because they're this way or they're that
that's
way."
right.
And
That's
so
right.
kind of like really recognizing that and being present, really listening to our audience, right? And paying attention to how what we are trying to do to support them is being received and whether or not it's helping. Getting feedback ourselves about how that is supporting them.
Yeah, so we wanted to, this is a good segue into the behaviors. And so just to give everybody a very quick grounding, because you're going to see language that you're like, what does this mean? Don't worry about that. But this is based on, so MRG has a tool called the Leadership Effectiveness Analysis, known as the LEA, that measures 22 leadership behaviors in 6 functions. So I'll run through them really quickly, and then we're going to talk about what were the differentiating, what did we look for in leaders before, and what are we looking for in leaders now? So one of the functions is, can you create a vision as a leader, and has a number of like competencies under that. How do you get them? You've got the vision. Now, how do you get the troops following you behind that vision? How do you implement that vision, get it done, and then follow through on your implementation plan? So that's really sort of the foundational things that as leaders we need to be able to do. And then it's underpinned with 2 other behaviors, one or sets of behaviors. One is around a results orientation. And we talk about this a lot at the roundtable. Are you a results leader? Are you a relational leader, people orientation? And how do you balance both those things? And so those are the 2 sort of areas there, like achieving results and then team playing. And so when we get people's 360s, we really see how are they leaning and what are the behaviors they're bringing in. And, leadership is situational. So, I think one of the things I love about the MRG suite is that we're looking at how do you adapt, right? Like you got to be able to lean into different behaviors in different situations. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to compare the high potential behaviors. And what we did was we took the two extremes. So we took the Gen X kind of cohort is the first cohort, and then
Uh-huh.
the later cohort to see what's changed. So Maria, walk
So
us
yeah,
through
so we
how
looked at,
leadership's
yeah, so two
evolving.
different time periods, right? Early 2000 and then 2021 to 2025. We didn't really separate by generation, but as Glenn is saying, most likely
It's
more
probably an
Gen
X and
Xers in that.
boomery kind of group,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, in that
Versus,
cohort,
yeah.
absolutely of high potential leaders, and then a current, picture in time. So how is leadership evolving? So when you compare those two time periods, and it's not high potentials. This is leaders
This
in
is
general, right? Not high
general, yeah.
potential, just leadership in general. We wanted to see how it's shifting. So what we're finding now is that leaders, in general, tend to be spending more time, placing more emphasis on maintaining their specialized knowledge and technical knowledge area of expertise, staying on top of advances. They tend to be focusing more on connecting with others and ensuring they're showing a genuine interest in their well-being. Like spending time to connect with others and form personal bonds with them. They are, and this one's interesting, uh, showing more deference to authority. And that means relying on more senior colleagues for guidance, but also sticking to the mandate of the organization. They're spending more time thinking, being future focused, thinking about the implications of their decisions. And they are placing less emphasis on being a forceful, challenging, more dominant leader. So there's this move toward, think connection, less, I'm the leader, I'm the boss, you have to listen to what I'm saying. But, there is I think a cognitive side to this, right? The technical, staying up to date with advances in their field, but so that they know, what's current, but also being analytical and
Yeah,
strategic
I
about the
think this
decisions they're
one, when I
making.
saw this one really poking up more recently, I think it makes sense because to make decisions, you need to have the grounding. And I think back in the day, like when I was really starting my leadership career, people would say to me, you don't need to be a specialist anymore. You're going to be a generalist. And it's not about you knowing the information, it's about you having good questions.
Hmm.
I would say that would be bad advice today for people. I think
Hmm.
the depth of knowledge you need to have because of the complexity, the speed, the change, you need to have a foundation,
Hmm.
right? Like we used to have the stereotype that if you're really high on technical, that deep knowledge, and that you could become the bottleneck. Now we're saying, no,
Hmm.
no, you need to maintain that knowledge so that you can, when people are coming to you
Yeah,
with ideas and things, make those decisions more quickly and be more informed, I think.
absolutely. And rely on others with their own specialized knowledge. So there's a need to communicate with others. Yes. Okay. So that was looking at leadership in general. So then we also looked at during those same two time periods, which behaviors defined a high potential leader. So back then, 2001 to 2005, being strategic, future focused, communicating clearly and completely, making sure that you're keeping people informed. Um, Having a management focus, taking charge, right? Raising your hand when something needs to get done to lead the efforts. Coming in with a lot of energy and excitement, and being contagious with that excitement, getting other people excited as well. Being achievement focused, right? Setting high achievement goals for yourself and for your team. Uh, Being creative and willing to try new things and take risks every once in a while, but less deference to authority, right? So that at that point, we're seeing a trend. Well, we'll get to that. So less deference to authority, less being less likely to rely on more senior leaders and kind of follow that mandate of the organization. So that was then. This is
Oh, and oh,
now.
and one
Oh
more.
no, there's
Oh, and
one more.
technical.
Sorry,
Yeah,
it's
and technical.
that grade confused me. The
Yeah.
tech and being more so technical again, staying on top of your specialized area of expertise. So
I should say too, like these are rank ordered in level of importance, right? So what's at the top is sort of leans more towards. So when we go to now, talk us through the changes that we're seeing.
So you will notice, and we're not going to go through them all of the behaviors that are important for high potential leadership now, or for being identified or seen as a high potential leader, were present before. However, two are missing. and that is deference to authority, which is higher now in general. And excitement is no longer a differentiator for high potential leaders. So, what are I, what's everyone thinking of that? I think the deference to authority one is so
Yeah, like
interesting.
why are we looking like now? Why is high potential? We're looking to people who are actually looking up for more direction, more like aligning more to what their manager is saying potentially. Whereas before we were saying, no, we want the Mavericks, we want the people that are going to be challenging authority a little bit more, right? That are doing that. I think, I mean, I have my theory about this, but I think that for me surprised me, I've got to say. Like I've seen
Hmm.
thousands of 360s and deference to authority was always sort of a lower scoring thing. And then what I started noticing in the last 5 years was that authority score moving up in the 360s that I was looking at. And I thought, this is interesting.
Yeah, and
We're
no, no, go ahead.
now, yeah, well, I was just going to say, because running hypo programs, you're seeing like pools of people and you're really seeing like that sort of shift.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's one thing that it's a question mark, right? It's a question I always have. So this is happening. So we also I did at one point look at the middle group, so 2011 to 2015, and there are no differences between that group and the early 2000s. So there is this qualitative shift, it seems like, happening now in the 2020s. Uh, and we can't forget that we had a pandemic right around this time.
right.
And so that's, how is that affecting it? Because that has affected our move toward more remote or flexible work arrangements. The whole pandemic brought about new ways of interacting, depending on your leaders to ensure that work was happening the way it should. So right. There's a big question there about how long, whether this is a permanent change, whether, these
Yeah.
trends are going to
I think
maintain.
that's what's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see. I think there's a lot of like in their report, there's just a lot of chaos and confusion happening out there right now, right?
Hmm.
So I can see where people are going. I can't actually go against a decision because you're not even telling me what the decision is. So
Hmm.
I think there's that piece of it that's really an interesting kind of component that's layering in. I'm not sure about the excitement. Is it just that we're all like post-pandemic blues and we're or we're saying to people get back to getting the work done, and that's just like let's get back to grinding it out. And so there, we don't need the passion, we just need to get the work done. I mean, I'm interested to see, as you say, how is this going to play out over the next 3 to 5 years, right?
Hmm.
So I can't believe the time has gone, Maria. So we had some things to get you all just to think about, and I've been watching. I think we've been covering off as comments are coming. I love the comments in the chat; they've been great. So here are some things to consider. I think as you think about your high potential planning, your leadership planning in general. I think one is you want to have competency models that adapt. I mean, what I love about sharing MRG research is that we can see that what got you there, what got you here won't get you there. And leadership is so situational. I think one of the things I see in competency models is that we don't isolate the behaviors, which is really what you want to be sort of thinking about. It's too jumbled: knowledge, skills, and behavior. Separate out the behaviors so that you can really get clear on that. Think about, I think, this individual contributor versus manager tracks. How well do you have those options for people in organizations? I think, how do you create structures that support more maybe collaborative approach to leadership development? That's things like compensation. That is, potentially about structure of teams. How are you helping people create those, conversations that matter and collaborative approaches to working together? Because I think the isolation piece and working from home is actually causing havoc on that. So I think we have to think differently around how we create those connections. And then I think the last thing is really thinking about this purpose piece as a group that's maybe not as motivated in that same excelling way that those of us that are in management roles right now were. I think you've got to be very careful if you unhinge purpose from profit in your organization, to quote Dan Pink, and really thinking about like that, like having to show up with authenticity around what you stand for as an organization. So I know we're at time, Maria. This has
This
been
always happens.
amazing. This always happens to us. Um, thank you everybody for being here. We're going to be sending out a recap of today's conversation. So you'll get a recap of that, the recording, feel free to share it around. The roundtable report you can get on our website. If you haven't read it, grab it. It does talk about the motivations of hypos. And then if you're interested in putting somebody through a program like the roundtable, which is all about creating collaborative leadership, we do and have our open enrollment enrolling right now. I think there's 2 seats left, so get on that fast if you're interested. And then last but not least, up next, I'm so excited for this conversation, real deal career things with 2 CHRO colleagues of ours, and we're going to ask the questions that nobody ever answers properly for people. So spread the word about that one. But Maria, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Nia, for getting us going.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.